Here's a quick recap of what Joe Biden just said in response to Russia's invasion into Ukraine. First, we do have oil, now Brent futures at about 101. The S&P and NASDAQ initially rising during the beginning of Biden's speech, but then retreating back. Our sponsor today, FTX, and our ability to track crypto, has enabled us to see that Bitcoin rose about $500 during the speech and has stabilized, has not come back down. Now, let's quickly go through exactly what Biden said. So Biden says that we're not doing this alone, that we're going to do everything we can to minimize the impact on the U.S. by implementing these new sanctions, and that we're going to work together with our allies to amplify the impact of these sanctions, and that our allies are in full agreement with our sanctions, along with the G7, countries like Germany, France, and so on, the United Kingdom. The goal of the sanctions announced today are to limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, and yen, and to stunt the ability, that's Japanese yen, and stunt the ability to grow their military and impair their ability to compete in high technologies and even to build ships. He says that we have already seen substantial damage to the Russian economy in referring to the Russian ruble, their currency falling to the weakest level ever. The Russian stock market plunged today, Joe Biden referenced. This is true. The Moscow Stock Exchange plunged over 30%, at one point rivaling the 50% decline that we had seen during hyperinflationary times in Argentina, as the MOEX fell upwards of 45% earlier today. Borrowing rates skyrocketed about 15% in Russia today. And we have seen companies like UBS value all bonds held by Russia or institutions who invest in Russian bonds, valuing them all at zero, triggering margin calls for those who use them as collateral in their margin accounts. Joe Biden announced that we will sanction all Russian banks with a total now of $1 trillion in American assets, they believe. Now, keep in mind the Russian Wealth Fund, having about $186 billion in U.S. dollar denominated assets, has already swiftly removed their United States capital preemptively to prevent the impact of these sorts of sanctions. We expect that, based on what the Russian ministry has told us, that many businesses and banks have already prepared for these sorts of sanctions. That right now we believe that every American asset will be frozen. More entities and individuals are being added to the list of those sanctions, but not including Putin. And this was interesting, that sanctioning Putin personally is still on the table, but was not chosen to be done, as well as expelling Russia's access to the SWIFT banking system, which could have broad-based implications for individuals in Russia and their ability to use credit cards, send wire transfers, and conduct banking transactions. This has not been implemented. So a ban or sanction, or essentially eliminating Russia from access to the SWIFT system, has not been implemented, despite that being widely speculated. Joe Biden says that the actions being taken by him and his administration and allies today are more impactful than kicking Russia out of SWIFT. We do have information that about 7,000 more troops are being ordered and deployed to Europe to defend NATO land. Earlier today, we saw numerous additional warplanes and helicopters being deployed to eastern NATO regions. The Ukrainian Health Ministry has also come out to declare that 57 troops have been killed in Ukraine, and 169 have been wounded so far, along with dozens of civilians, despite Russia not specifically targeting civilians. Joe Biden says that our forces will not be engaged in Ukraine, but we will defend our allies and we will meet our Article 5 commitments. So he is now reiterating how certain the United States is to do whatever they can to make sure they defend NATO countries. And Joe Biden says that this is necessary to not embolden Putin to potentially try to go into NATO countries, whether those are north above Belarus or further west towards, say, Poland. The goal here for Biden, again, to limit the costs on Americans and doing everything he can to reduce the cost of oil and gas, in addition to requesting that companies not raise their gas and oil prices or energy cost prices, and will also work to release further barrels of oil from the strategic oil reserve in the United States. He does say, because there were speculations that the United States could attack Russia with cyber warfare to help Ukraine, it appears that right now we expect the United States to only conduct cyber warfare against Russia in the event that Russia targets the United States. So Joe Biden gave us no suggestion that cyber warfare would be used against Russia right now, that right now they will impose sanctions that exceed that of kicking Russia out of SWIFT. During questions, he was asked if Putin might consider a nuclear strike. This follows comments by Putin earlier suggesting that if anyone attacks Russia or tries to interfere with Russia, that Russia could end up using nuclear weapons. Joe Biden said, "I have no idea what Putin is threatening." He did say that sanctions take time to impact Russia. And probably the biggest head scratcher was that Joe Biden said it will take about a month, or we'll check back in a month to see if the sanctions can work. This is because individuals reporters were asking, what if these sanctions don't work to stop Russia? And he says he believes that they will, that these are profound sanctions. They exceed anything that has been done before, that relations between Russia and the U.S. right now are, quote, ruptured. And he says, quote, let's talk in a month to see if they're working. A lot of folks questioning why would Joe Biden wait a month. I know sanctions can take a while, especially economic sanctions, to actually have an impact. But this comes also in coordination with more sanctions from Canada and the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, for example, eliminating all Russian Aeroflot flights from being able to fly into the United Kingdom. The International Monetary Fund suggesting that there is significant economic risk to the globe from the Ukraine conflict. The Federal Reserve responding and suggesting that increased oil prices could actually dampen demand in the United States, which, interestingly, oil prices lead to higher inflation. But if oil prices dampen demand for other things, maybe we would see less inflation outside of energy. So when we strip energy out, maybe we'll finally see prices settle down. And so this is where Mester and Daly indicate there's a continued need to tighten gradually, that they have not decided yet how Ukraine is likely to affect the economy or their plans to hike. Markets are pricing in a 25 basis point hike with about an 85% probability of certainty as of March 16th, when the Federal Reserve meets next. We're not seeing a lot of pricing in of the 50 basis point hike. Russians have control of Chernobyl. During Biden's speech, there was also a note that we expect Kyiv to fall within the next few hours. And so it's possible by the time you're watching this, Kyiv may have already fallen to Russia. The Ukrainian air defense has been mostly eliminated, paving the way for Russia to potentially move forward. Bitcoin now at 36.4. Tesla almost up about 1% on the day. The NASDAQ up about 1% on the day. And S&P sitting at 420, which was our low of, this is our 0% Fibonacci retracement line, back to January 24th. S&P 500 down about 0.4% right now. And that's an update on what Joe Biden just told us regarding sanctioning Russia.